Previously on the Side Quest Gamer.
Yeah, I would much rather play the North American version of Battletoads than this game, because subjectively speaking, I would rather be frustrated than bored. Oh no, what did I walk into now? Hello everyone, Alec Elger the Side Quest Gamer here, and we all know Battletoads, right? It's one of the hardest NES games out there, and a lot of people love it, and a lot of people don't like it for its insane difficulty. And some people debate whether it's actually a good game or not, as it does have some questionable design choices, but I'll be the judge of that for this review, so let's roll the footage and check out Battletoads for not only the NES, but the Famicom, because both versions are actually very different.
Now before we dive into the actual review, I think we'd better talk about the 1990s elephant in the room. Yes, these are evidently a product of what I like to call the anthropomorphs with attitude era, because of the popularity with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon and video games that featured 4 anthropomorphic turtles who were extreme. Other companies decided to make their own spin on the idea, like the Street Sharks, SWAT Cats, and Biker Mice from Mars did with their cartoons, where it was obvious that they took some inspiration from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they had enough original ideas. Then there's the blatant rip-offs like the Cheetah Men, which are just self-explanatory. Just look at them. But anyways, Battletoads is a product of this craze. I mean, 3 mutant space toads who are good in combat while being watched by an elderly anthropomorphic creature of another species. Never heard of that one before. But this started out as a video game franchise. It did have a proposed cartoon pilot after the success of this game, but let's just say it's almost as bad as the Bubsy cartoon pilot.
Let's get warning!
Battletoads was developed by Rare for the NES in 1991. The game stars Rash and Zitz, who set out to rescue the princess and their fellow Battletoad Pimples from their arch-nemesis, the rather seductive Dark Queen.
Before you ask, yes, that's the actual name of the Battletoads.
The game itself is mostly a beat-em-up, kind of like Double Dragon, but only kind of, because this game loves to use different playstyles, where the first level is a traditional beat-em-up, the next you're in a cave, descending with a bungee cord, then you're in the turbo tunnel, then you're platforming, then you're surfing. The game is more unfocused than Earthworm Jim 2, and I kind of like it this way, but if I had to give it a genre, I would say it's a beat-em-up platformer, since a lot of the levels require precise platforming, but you still have your beat-em-up moveset to take on enemies. As you've probably heard, this game is hard. I mean really hard. As Cranky Kong from the first Donkey Kong Country would say, which is coincidentally another game made by Rare, 3 lives, 3 continues, that's it. And many people never got past the infamous Turbo Tunnel because of that aspect. At least for the North American version. But the Japanese version is a lot easier, where it has like 5 lives and 5 continues. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the enemies and even the levels feel a bit easier in the Japanese version. I only beat the Turbo Tunnel in just a few tries, and no, it's not because I'm good at video games or anything. NES veterans had a really hard time with the Turbo Tunnel, and I think for the NES version it's slightly faster than the Japanese version. I could be wrong, but knowing that timing is everything, slightly increasing the speed for the North American version can make the Turbo Tunnel a lot harder than it needs to be. Now if you're wondering why the Japanese version is easier, in my Echo the Dolphin review I said that some developers make video games intentionally harder in North America because of the rental market there. If they put in so many obstacles, the game cannot be beaten in a mere rental period, which is usually a weekend for most kids, so therefore gamers would have to actually buy the game in order to practice and invest enough time so they eventually beat it. And as a result, gamers would be paying $50 to the developers instead of paying their money to those who rent out the games. But in Japan, because the games were more disc-based instead of cartridge-based like in North America, Famicom games were easier to pirate. So to prevent software piracy over there with illegal copies being sold by bootleggers, Japan made it illegal to rent out games unless the publisher allowed for their game to be rented out. I'm not sure if it's still legal to rent out games in Japan now, but that's how it was back when Battletoads was released. The end result, Japanese gamers had to buy their games, new or used, but developers would allow the Japanese releases to be as easy as they wanted to be, or as hard as they wanted to be. Either way, they would get their money from the Japanese market for those who actually buy the games new. But just because the Japanese version is easier, doesn't mean it's an easy game over there. It's still hard. But whatever version you're playing, they both have levels that can get really annoying for first timers. A lot of the levels are really fun, and I have to admit, I did enjoy the turbo tunnel and surfing levels in the Japanese version. But a lot of the levels require level memorization, like the ice caves and snake pit levels. The ice cave, I died just because there was an instant kill spike pit under a quickly descending platform. There was a platform to the left that you had to land on, but you wouldn't know that unless you looked up a walkthrough or saw it on your way to death. And in the snake pit, there's instant kill spikes with these giant snakes you need to ride on, but you need to memorize their movements, as sometimes they'll turn past your frame of vision and you wouldn't know which way they turned. Was it left or was it right? You wouldn't know unless you memorize their movements. So the levels overall, half of them are really fun, but the other half can be hard for the wrong reasons, like visibility issues. And this is in both versions, and it doesn't help that the North American version is less forgiving with only 3 lives and 3 continues. That's like a total of 9 lives. And the difficulty curve due to level placement itself is even more controversial. For example, the Surf City level would have worked better as a 3rd level, and the Turbo Tunnel would have worked better as a 5th level. The Snake Pit should have been placed towards the end instead of being the 6th level. And now, as for the game graphically, they're in my opinion some of the best on the NES. The game sports kind of a cave theme where it all feels underground, but the traditional cutscenes look good, the backgrounds look good, the enemies have character put into them, and Battletoads themselves look really good. Rare always seemed to have graphically charming games. Even if you hated Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts, you have to admit that even that game had beautiful graphics. The music has some pretty catchy 8-bit soundtracks, with my favorite track in the game oddly being the pause theme. I don't know why, but it's just so awesome. Ask anyone who has played Battletoads on the NES to sing the pause menu theme, and they'll do it. Now as for the Japanese version, when you pause the game, you just get this. Silence.
For that reason alone, I would give the Japanese version a 0 out of 100. If you don't include the pause theme, then it's automatically worse than Bubsy 3D and Awesome Possum.
The controls are also something I'd like to point out. They're ultra smooth for the beat-em-up sections and precise with the surfing, turbo tunnel, and flying sections, but for platforming, they take some getting used to. Like the jumps are kind of hard to manipulate the trajectory of, and sometimes feel clunky when going from platform to platform. I don't mind it having the battle mechanics for taking out enemies, but for really muscular toads, they seem to lack precise jumping that a normal toad would have. So overall, did this game age well? It didn't age badly, I will say, as the appeal of the game still exists to this day, and the graphics look very good. I'd say its unforgiving difficulty may anger some people, but getting farther and farther was what motivated many, so it aged moderately. You could tell it's from the 80s, but you didn't care nonetheless. The Rare Replay version I've heard had a rewind feature, but I don't think that would be fair to the game. I would say if you want to reach the end that badly, use the Unlimited Continues cheat, but if you want to play the game the real way, get the Japanese version either through emulation or the actual physical copy. The North American one, I can't easily recommend to everyone, but if you're a collector, why not seek it out? So overall, this game is just decent. Not the best NES game ever, but I would give the North American version a 71 out of 100, while the Japanese version I would give a 74 out of 100. The gameplay is functional for the most part, but extremely frustrating at certain parts, and if you're thinking about doing co-op with a friend, good luck with the Wookiee Tunnel, and if you two get past the Wookiee Tunnel, then good luck with the Turbo Tunnel, because that'll be the end of the road for you two. If you're looking for a good challenge, this might be right up your alley. This game did get a Game Boy semi-sequel, which was quite different in terms of gameplay, and the game also got 3 sequels, Battletoads and Battlemaniacs, Battletoads and Double Dragon, and Battletoads Arcade. I'll get to those sometime next year, but I've got a lot on my plate right now.
But now, the franchise is kind of dead. Like Earthworm Jim, the franchise just kind of disappeared despite fans begging for another sequel, but unlike Earthworm Jim, Battletoads never really had a bad game in the franchise. Why do the publishers just let their famous IP sit there for like 20 years? Well, at least recently, in the indie game Shovel Knight, they made a cameo appearance in the Xbox exclusive DLC, and they did have 2 of their games put on the Rare Replay collection for the Xbox One, so maybe that's hinting that the franchise might come back. Say, if those 2 things sell very well, they might bring them back. I don't know, but it would be cool to see a sequel for Battletoads. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.